morning. Okay, I hear echo.
I was trying something different.
Uh-oh.
Oops.
Echo. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I still hear the echo.
But I still. Wait a minute.
Welcome, Daryl. Welcome, Jean. I hope I'm saying your name right. And if I'm not, please excuse me. Feel free to come up to the stage on Clubhouse. Welcome to the YouTube folks. I got comments. Good morning, Evolving 365. Welcome. I'm trying to get out a couple little glitches here real quick.
You've been here in Clubhouse, which is, StreamYard, which is what I usually do. Oh. All right.
Okay. Oh, let me see.
So we're all good now, right?
I think we're all good. Wait, I do this. Or I do this. Either way. Okay. I don't have a fancy border. That's coming next. Look, I have a whole list of to-dos for this Saturday morning tea. So okay, look, I think I got everybody. I think I'm doing everything. Let's see. Well, welcome to our Saturday morning tea, where we discuss health information, news, education, and certification tips. I am Clarice Warner, the girl with the pearls, the founder and education director of the Professional Reimbursement Network, LLC, where coding education is key. And joining me today, yay, is my co-host, who's been a godsend in these last couple of months, Mr. Jesse, the coding nurse. So, sir, introduce yourself and tell the folks all about you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jesse. I have been a nurse for 28 years, and about almost 8 years ago, I got tired of the bedside, and I got an opportunity to move into medical coding, risk adjustment medical coding, in fact, and it was a match made in heaven, and I just love it. So in 2020, I created the Coding Nurse LLC to help other nurses and people in healthcare transition away from the bedside and get into HIM.
Cool. Look at you doing all the things to help multiple professions. Let's see. In our Clubhouse room, we got a couple of folks, Daryl and I don't want to butcher your name. I'm gonna say
probably Janae.
Janae. Okay, thank you so much. Feel free to come up to this. Oh, let me make you moderator. Feel free to come up to the stage, if you like, and introduce yourself and all those wonderful things. But we got some tea today, sir. Let me just say, we got some tea. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
How's it going?
Just fine. Thank you for asking.
Good. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
So, yes, sir. So, if you are a member of the AAPC, you probably received an email Thursday night, Thursday afternoon, about some of the changes that will happen in just a few short weeks. I was kind of the time frame of the changes was the first thing that stuck me. Like, did this say 2022?
I mean, no mention beforehand.
I was like,
nowhere.
Did this say 2022? Wait, I had to go back and look. Like, that's in a couple of weeks. So that was the first thing that stopped me. But we'll get into that. So they have released information about changes that will be made to their certification exams. And on first glance, you know, the changes sound good. Like, okay, well, here we go. What's up? Hey. On a second glance, I don't know. And so we're going to get into that and talk about that today. So the major change is, okay, I hear, is it me? No. The major change that we got going on is that they are going to change the format. At least for what I know for certain is for the CPC exam. I think it applies to most of the exams that have the same format as the CPC exam. But there are other exams that the certification exams that the AAPC have that are a little different. And so I'm not 100% certain how they're going to roll that in. And I hadn't seen information related to that. But anyway, the big news is that they're changing their format. It will now, the time for the CPC exam will be reduced to 4 hours. Yes, 4 hours. In that same vein, they are also reducing the number of questions. So you will have 4 hours to complete 100 questions. Now chew on that for a minute. What was your initial thoughts when you heard that, Mr. Jesse?
My initial thoughts were they were trying to get in. I think they were trying to bring the time down to be more competitive with the HEMA, because some people are in by test time. When somebody hears 5 hours 40 minutes, they're like, I'll never get through it. So it's some people it's a fear factor. Overall, I think it'll be a good thing, because I felt as though I have 3 AAPC credentials, and one of them is not include the CPB. That one is a little different, because that's right now it's 200 questions and 5 hours 40 minutes, and they're going to reduce that to 135 questions. But I think that they could achieve their objectives in less questions.
Yes.
So I think I don't think the exam will be any easier, but I think it'll be easier in terms of time, in terms of how you prepare, in terms of how you pace yourself.
So to that point, I think it's clear that there has to be some strategy, more intentional strategies involved with your test taking, as they have modified their certification exams. And so I think that's that may catch folks. The other thing I thought, I was like, that's an interesting point about 5 hours. I don't think I can do that. 4 hours sounds doable. That's that same marketing ploy of $2.99 versus $3. I didn't think about that, but that's interesting. That's interesting that you mentioned that. The thing I thought, because like I said, I used to proctor for AAPC exams, and folks would just go completely. I didn't have enough time. So even though you have the folks that felt like they couldn't sit that long or get through it, you have folks on the opposite swing that felt it wasn't enough time at all. And I'm like, whoo. For me as a proctor, and we'll talk a little bit about what has been shared in the white paper. If you're on YouTube, you can actually, the link is in the description box. But sometimes it's hard to even get proctors to sit for that, 5 hours, and provide the proctoring services. And actually, as a proctor, you're there longer than 5 hours. You're there a little longer. So yeah. It's like, wow. It's like, wow. So I think that was one of the things that they mentioned. Another thing they mentioned was, well, since they reduced it to like 4 hours, that maybe you could have multiple exams happening on the same day. Who does that? That I was like, really? Really? Who does that? Who does that? So so maybe you get an opportunity to flip proctors out. Maybe that's how they will handle that if you were doing 2 exams in the same day. So if you had a 4-hour morning exam and then a 4-hour like afternoon exam and maybe 2 different proctors, but then that's still a lot. I don't know. Those were some of the things that I was like, okay. So if you missed it, go ahead.
Can we ask like Daryl and Janae, are they certified, and how do they feel about the exam changes?
Yes, this is Daryl. I'm certified. I think it's in my opinion, I think it's good because for me, as far as testing, I'm not really good at testing exams. So I think it'll be the people who struggle as far as people who struggle taking the exams, the time of the exam. I think they would struggle and they won't finish through.
Okay.
Janae, did you have anything?
Yes, I am currently not a medical coder. I'm studying for my CPC exam at the moment.
Okay.
I do have experience in the healthcare field. I've been a nurse for 20 years, but I want to transition into medical coding.
Okay.
In my opinion, with the exam changes, I think that the 4-hour time limit to complete the exam is really generous. But the catch-all will be the 100 questions. A potential test taker still has to take the time to do in-depth preparation.
Exactly.
I agree. Go ahead.
The only thing you too, Clarice, like we're both certified through AHIMA and AAPC.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to honestly say, when it comes to exams, I think that AHIMA's questions and I think how they answer questions is far better than AAPC. I was really impressed because like they don't have 150 questions on their exam. Well, not on the coding exams. And they cover a lot of territory. Like you're not going to just breeze in there and breeze out. Like you have to know. And they ask you, it's interesting how they combine things. You can, once you're going through the exam, you can see the concepts they're asking about, and you see they want you to know, not only do they want you to know coding, they want you to know like regulatory information. They want you to know HIPAA information, and they really do a very, very good job of covering the full gamut in those in the 4 hours that they give you. And I've never run out of any time. I've had more time on AHIMA exams than AAPC exams left over.
Mm-hmm. I think with the AAPC, they try to do the same thing because you have the different sections where it encompasses all the things that you should know as a medical coder, being compliance information, reimbursement information, ICD-10 information, and then of course the meat on the bones is CPT, and so everything CPT. One of the things that I saw, because I think initially I thought, oh, okay, well, this will give folks an opportunity to get through the questions and all of that. But if you read the white paper, if you go in depth and look at some of the things that they've shared, particularly when they talk about reliability and when they did the beta test, and there was only a 1% difference in the pass rate from the 100 item CPC exam to the pass rate for the 150 item CPC exam. So I stopped right there, like, well, wait a minute. That's not significant. A 1% difference in the pass rate. That made me scratch my head a little bit, like, well, wait a minute. Yeah. And then you really only got a few extra seconds as it relates to the amount of time you should allot per question. So I think it's going to be a big push on AAPC, to your point, Jesse, to have meaningful questions that demonstrate the coder's abilities in medical coding and their understanding of medical coding and the processes. So it's going to be real important. It's going to, the burden is going to lay on the AAPC, I think, as it relates to their questions and maybe changing their questions. And even in the white paper, they kind of go through their whole format of how they develop their examinations. And it appears to be a very thorough process. I'm reading comments. I'm sorry. So Melvin said, I took the CCA exam 2 hours for 106 questions. So I had like less than 50 seconds to answer each question. Now we AAPC, and this changes, CPC will probably be a better option rather than the CCS exam. Well, that's interesting. That's interesting. The CPC exam, so he also asked the question, can the CPC exam compete with the CCS credential? They're two different, the focus is different. So the AAPC does have an inpatient coding credential, and that is the credential that kind of mirrors the CCS, if you will. The CCSP is what originally was supposed to mirror the CPC. So if you're standing in both hats, or standing in both camps, AAPC and AHIMA, you would, if you're working in the professional capacity, meaning you're providing coding services for providers, then you would look at the CPC for AAPC, and then you would look at the CCSP for AHIMA. So yeah, that 1%, I was like, really? really? And then the beta testers also took a survey, and some of the results, they said that 92% of them agreed or strongly agreed that the cases and questions accurately reflected the proficiency needed in the field for the certification exam. 81% felt that the exam was at the appropriate level of difficulty. 79% agreed or strongly agreed a master's level of proficiency is needed to score well on the exam. 73% felt they were able to answer all questions in the allotted time. And then 55% felt 4 hours was the right amount of time. So yeah, that's interesting. The other thing I saw that left the door open, and this because I think, well, it left the door open for additional changes to the AAPC format, meaning that they may consider changing it from an all multiple choice exam. There was a little line in that white paper that left that door open. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think that would be something that would be good for the AAPC to do on their CPC exam?
I just don't think it's necessary. I don't. I mean, I don't know what the need to change from a multiple choice format would be. I mean, because that's like, I didn't even understand how, when they came out with the CIC, because, you know, you don't, when it first came out, you didn't get those results in a week because it wasn't all multiple choice. It was some fill in the blank questions. So they had to be manually looked at and hand scored. And I'm like, I'm not understanding. Like, there are concepts that you have to know as a coder. I totally understand that. But I just think that there's a way to test concepts easier. And I mean, AHIMA has no problem doing it. I mean, that CCS exam is no joke. and they cover a whole lot of territory in that time. And AAPC could do the same thing. Because I've never understood about the CPC exam, and what made no sense is, why do you have to have 10 questions from each section? I've never understood that. Like, that doesn't make sense to me, because there are certain conditions that you're going to have that are common in every section of CPT. Why not just cover the most common? Like, I don't, like, who cares if somebody had honestly, in the grand scheme of things, the CPT code for a blepharotomy, who cares? Like, when you have people who have like cataract implants, and they have cataract surgery with like the ocular implants, like, that's something you'll see. I just think they could do better.
Well, I think it's similar. It's where you're looking at the real world experience versus the classroom experience, or the simulated experience. And so asking a variety of questions, or a multitude of questions in different areas from a classroom perspective, provides information or data to support or refute whether or not the different topics, or in our case, guidelines in those specific areas, were addressed and mastered. So I get why they would go through the various sections of CPT for the CPC exam, because while there's some commonalities with the guidelines and the guidance, there are some variations depending on the section that you're in. And so they want to make sure that because it's a core, well, at one point it was a core credential that you needed to have before you can build your credentialing library, if you will, or those alphabet soup behind your name years before. And so they want to make sure that you were proficient in at least the core before you kind of went into specialty. So I get that. So in the shortening AAP certification exam section on the white paper, it talked about that each of the domains would have their weakest questions removed from each domain at an equal percentage. So again, it may result in a variation of domain percentages. For example, if time were to be cut in half, a domain with 5 questions would require reducing the domain to 2 or 3 questions versus 2.5 questions. And the questions would need to remain mapped to competencies and sent through a subject matter expert review to verify all required competencies necessary remain covered in the exam. And then they also talked about how altering the exam to deploy varying question formats on the exam will take more time and effort, but may result in increased validity and reliability. For example, the first set of questions would remain multiple choice, and the later part of the exam could be cases followed by multiple choice or more real life situations, such as fill in multiple blanks. And then this type of shortening of the exams would follow the full new exam creation process. So that's where they kind of left the door open for a shift or a change in the exam format. And I think there are pros and cons to that.
But that's what AHEMA has been doing. Like, they have the first section, the first 97 questions, and I think 12 of them are test questions. Sample, they don't count. But the first 97 questions are multiple choice. Then you have 8 cases, and out of those, and in those 8 cases, you still have to select the primary diagnosis and any other procedure codes. So, and those are multiple choice from the drop down.
Yep. So it's gonna be interesting that, they're kind of aligning their exam, potentially aligning their exam, because I haven't seen a plus or minus. Good morning, Jasmine. Welcome. And hi, Keisha. Welcome. Feel free to come up to the stage and join in the conversation. I haven't seen any specifics or confirmation that, everything is going to change, especially with this 2-week turnaround. I don't know. Maybe they're going to sample and test out just the timing reduction and the number of question reduction first before they get into, well, what does that look like as it relates to the formatting? But it's interesting that they're going to, that the potential exists for them to align with a format that's similar to AHIMA.
Well, I think that what I think the test takers have to take away from this is that you still have to have a test taking strategy. I don't care what exam you sit for. You have to have a test taking strategy, number one.
Yep.
Number two, you have to be prepared. If you don't know the guidelines or you're not comfortable, don't take it. Wait until you're comfortable. And like, I just think that AAPC, I think that they have their status. I mean, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I don't have any issue with the organization, but I don't think that they should try to align themselves with the HEMA, because that's a hill they're not going to be able to climb. I mean, because until the HEMA is no longer one of the 4 cooperating parties, there's nothing AAPC can do to compete with them. So don't even try. Become the master of what it is you're doing. Because they seem to, AAPC has kind of taken an outpatient lane and they've dominated. They have so many outpatient specialty certifications, and they're good at, like, my CPMA. I mean, I thought that was a great exam. I mean, they covered a lot of content, and I felt comfortable doing auditing because I learned all about the regulatory and legal ramifications of, overcoding and of upcoding and all this other kind of stuff. And you knew what to look for. So I don't really, HEMA is, I don't know. I mean, they're like the GOAT. You can't mess with them right now until you get them away from that table. They're not in the same league.
And that's interesting because folks can say the same thing about AHIMA, where they tried to reach over into the professional space, and really, I don't know whether or not, because oftentimes their credentials, while they may be recognized, they may not necessarily be the preferred credential in that professional space.
Now, this is what I find interesting from employers, not from AHIMA. What I find interesting from employers is when you apply for jobs, I've applied for plenty of jobs. They will say you either have to have your CPC or your CCS. Mm-hmm. It's an outpatient, but very few of them will say CPC or CCSP. I see it now more than I did when I first got mine in like 2018.
And I think that comes from providing information and educating HR and getting them, and or I guess mostly the employer, the folks who are actually in those departments should know that there are differences. But I think with the job descriptions and announcements, they don't make that the changes in those things from their perspective. And so they may have some, because I've seen some job descriptions, believe it or not, in 2021 that still say ICD-9.
Yeah, I have.
I was like,
somebody sent me a test.
I said, oh my God.
It was ICD-9.
So I don't think that they're keeping up with the times. And so I said, are you kidding me right now? Did that say ICD-9 for real? Wow.
But I'm telling you, I had a test in ICD-9. They sent me the test. I was like, I responded back. I said, I can't do this. I don't even have an ICD-9 book. Right? That's crazy. They didn't say, oh, that's our mistake. No.
That's just the test that they done dug up. Somebody done went through somebody else's drawers and file cabinet and pulled out an old test. Like, here we go. We got something. Let's send it. This is what we're going to send. Amazing.
Since we're talking about, I have to tell you.
Here we go. The tea.
I had this coworker and former coworker, and she kept on like putting out these little feelers, these little teasers, like she had some tea. So she was like, well, I have the actual CCS exam. I said, what? She said, yeah, I know somebody who has, they have the full CCS exam. She said, but it's in, it's the ICD-9 version. I hollered, Clarice. And she told me this last year. And she was like, I'm not gonna, I would send it to you, but I'm not gonna email it. I would have to put it in the mail. I'm like, do you really think that they're using the exact same exam in ICD-10 and they had an ICD-9, even if there was the actual exam? What are you talking about?
Wow.
They have so many different codes now. The guidelines have changed tremendously since 2015.
Oh my goodness. Yes. The whole guideline, there's sections that are different and altered and added and deleted and all kinds of things. Wow.
They didn't even have COVID in 2015.
Somebody wanted to, like you can't, those ma'am. You said she thought she had the tea.
And I guess she thought I was going to jump on that. First of all, like, I don't need no help passing no tests. I don't have no problem with that. I know how to prepare. Thank God.
Right. And like you said, that is the key. That is the key. So even with the information about the changes to the AAP's exam, it's really about your strategy in learning how to code. Because again, you're taking this, it's one thing, and it's a great thing to show on paper that you successfully passed a certification exam. It's something else to show to an employer that you've mastered that information, that you know what the guidance is and what the guidelines are. Totally different. Two different things there. Two different things.
Now, the only thing I want to know is, how is AAPC going to change up their practice tests? Because because now the practice tests are 50 questions, so it's like a third of a full exam. So are their practice tests going to continue to be 50 questions, which would be half of an exam, or would it go down to like 35 questions?
I didn't see any information on that. I would hope that they would just keep the same questions and maybe just change the time to match the time allowed. But because again, it's only just a few more seconds that they're giving you per question. It's not a big deal. So the thing is understanding, I mean, at the end of the day, it all falls back to the guidelines and the guidelines being your friend and understanding those guidelines and those testing areas.
Well, what I could probably surmise from just them eliminating 50 questions, there's no in the world they can ask you 10 questions from each section of CPT.
Oh, no, they're not going to do that.
So, and that was like that was my main sticking point with AAPC. I'm like, this is just overkill in my opinion. But I think that now that they will move to, I'm not going to say a broader format, but a more, I think they're able to drill down on more specific like topics. And I think that also probably they've gotten some feedback probably from the industry, because I'm telling you, it's a whole lot of people out here who are not really up to snuff with their coding when they're coming out of these schools, even with certifications. Mm-hmm. So I think that the industry could be saying like, look, we need people who know such and such, like, and I think that the exams could be reflective to drill that down and to help prepare people.
Well, you and I both know that there are certain areas and certain guidelines that are you see all the time. They're commonplace, and things that a coder really needs to know. I'm curious to know how they will, from these changes, incorporate some of the things that happen year to year. So I know, like you said, maybe if they're going to a broader, then if they're staying at a broader exam format, question format, if you will, where will the room for like the new changes come into play? Like, how will they? I'm curious to know what that question ratio would look like. You know, your standard traditional guidelines and guidance that you really should know versus what they're adding every year, what's new, what's, you know, evolving, that type of thing. I'm curious to know what that would look like going forward and how that helps.
So Daryl and Janae, what do you all think?
Say the question again. I'm sorry.
Hi, Telaria. I hope I say your name right. Feel free to come up to the stage and join the conversation if you like.
So just what I would mainly want to know is like, what do you think about? I know you'd already commented on, you know, the changes and test taken, but so I also wanted to ask, like, so were you considering any additional credentials at the moment?
No, I'm just trying to focus on just my CCS. I already have it. For me as a coder, I'm just trying to figure out ways to really improve my skills and my skill set. Like that's one of the questions I wanted to ask both of y'all. Like, how can I as a coder really, you know, study effectively at the same time? Any tips to really, like, you know, focus on like just mastering coding, because I feel like I have an issue as far as like studying coding while I'm working to better my skills. So do you have any like tips and strategies?
Okay, so what area are you struggling in? Is it ICD-10-CM? Is it CPT or is it PCS?
I would say PCS.
Okay, PCS. Hands down, you have to memorize the root operations. You have to know what they are. If you don't memorize the root operations, PCS will never make sense.
Okay.
Because that's how you find it in the book. You find it by the root operation. And if they're admitted to the hospital and they have a fractured femur, the root operation is reposition. So you will find then you go to reposition and you go to femur and you pick left or right, and then that will give you the first 4 characters, and you go to the PCS table for the rest of it. But you have to know the root operation definitions. Like, you have to know, like, if someone is going for if they're going to have their gallbladder removed, you have to know or read the operative report to determine usually all the gallbladders removed, but let's just say they didn't remove all of it, it was partial. So you have to know the root operation. You have to know that either it's an excision or it's a resection. An excision is part of a body part and a resection is all of a body part.
Okay.
So
and generally, I think they also, all of the testing or all of the exams, regardless of AAPC or CPC, kind of give you a framework in which to focus your studying strategy. So they'll tell you, these are the areas that you would need to know. These are the types of information you need to know for each type of exam, so that you won't hopefully spend a lot of time studying a whole bunch of stuff in ICD-10 for something that is not necessarily diagnosis or diagnosis coding related.
But when it comes to the CCS, they just say you have to assign codes in these code sets, but they don't really, like, because I know, like, they ask you like they ask you like root operation definitions. They want you to know but it doesn't say on it like you'll need to know what are the root operations for a biopsy are. But for that exam, you need to know.
Correct.
You need to know what the 3 root operations are. So that's the kind of information you would need, Daryl, to study and prepare.
Okay. Hey, Jesse, question: Do you have services for like coders, like to help them out, like a paid service?
Yeah, you can go to my website, thecodingnurse.com.
Okay. Thank you.
And Clarice can help you as well.
All right. Thank you.
Anybody else want to chime in on what their thoughts, initial or otherwise, as it relates to the new AAPC coding certification changes slated for just a few short weeks from today for 2022?
What I would like to see across all exams, AHEMA and AAPC, is I would want them to, and I know it's easier for when you're answering the questions, but I think that they should make people level E&M. Like, not just give them the level and say, what codes are assigned. Like, they don't need to be given the history exam and medical decision making. They need to learn how to do it manually.
In my class, they do.
But on the test, they don't.
So when you walk away from my class, you know how to level a service, because I walk you through that.
But on the
and then I show them, I give them both. I give them, again, a real world example where this is how you take this information and you go through and look and level those particular services, both for the new 2021 guidelines for the office, and then also the older guidelines for inpatient. So they get a flavor for how to do that. And then I take those same scenarios. So once we've decided collectively in my classroom setting, collectively and agreed upon, okay, this is what we think these levels are. Let's apply this to how a question could potentially be formatted for you in an exam situation. And then we would apply it that way. So yeah, they walk away with understanding both of those, and also using, and so it's a slight variation to not only looking at it and leveling that service, but then kind of auditing that service too. So if you think that, so in our situations, if you think it's this, verify that. Why do you think it's that? Show me what you did. And so they're also introduced to like an auditing tool where they can kind of go through and say, well, I saw this, I saw this, I saw that. And, we can have those discussions related to that as well.
Because for your CPMA, that was the only exam that for AAPC that I ever had to level E&M, because it's like you said, it's the auditing, and you had to have an audit sheet in addition to, the 97, 95 guidelines.
Yeah. I do. E&M was in my sleep. It's like a whole second language for me. And I will rattle it off.
And I had some questions from an exam. They were actually really good. And the thing is, like, it's amazing how you study things, but when you don't use it, you really do. You start to slip. And it's like, oh my God, these are some good questions. And I'm like, and then even when you do, like, even continuing education, it's hard to find. I did find one lady who had a really, really good E&M course, because I did the E&M course through AAPC. I didn't find it to be all that helpful. Like, I found her, when I had to get CUs for the next cycle, I found her class to be way more informative.
Mm-hmm. So I think again, that's, even though your certification is quite broad, if you are specializing in a particular area, I think it's key and paramount for you to make sure that you thoroughly understand those areas. For example, if you're looking at providing E&M services, or, coding for E&M services from the professional side, understanding what that looks like, being on top of the various changes, because changes are occurring left and right in the E&M space. There are additions, there are deletions. As we get into telehealth, what that looks like. Good morning, Gloria. Welcome feel free to come up to the stage and join in the conversation if you like. Looking at what that looks like, all of those things, even in like anesthesiology, you know, oftentimes folks who are testing for the CPC exam, they're not working in an anesthesiology practice, so they're only seeing that for that small amount of time in a classroom situation. But just staying abreast of the various changes that occur year to year helps you kind of stay in the know of, oh, okay, well, this is what's happening in that space. I remember from class, hopefully, or your exam, these are the type of questions that you need to know about anesthesiology and how you can assist in that. And then if you choose to go that route, then you stay current. But yeah, I think if you're going to specialize, then you may want to take the time to thoroughly understand those particular areas. And there are several resources out there that are helpful for you to specialize, even if you don't necessarily sit for a specialty exam, but having the knowledge and walking into an employment space where you can speak that language helps them understand that you understand what you're talking about as it relates to that particular coding area.
So Janae, I don't know if you can respond, but now that you are preparing for your CPC exam, and you know that there are changes to the exam time frame and some content, is that going to change how you are continuing to study moving forward?
Hello. For me, that is exactly what I'm concerned with, how to prepare for the CPC exam.
Okay, so how are you doing it now?
What I'm doing right now is, yes, I'm doing my chapter reviews, but my concern is within each chapter, what exactly should I be focusing on?
Okay.
Because I'm sure that once I take the CPC exam, every sentence and every paragraph, no, it's not going to be on the exam.
Right. Okay, so when you say chapter, are you referring to ICD-10-CM or CPC? Yes. Or both?
Yes, the ICD-10-CM.
Okay. Now, I don't know how Clarice feels about this, but I have kind of done my own little unscientific study.
Yeah.
And I have found that out of all 20-something chapters in the ICD-10-CM book, most of the questions and most of the things you need to know come down to about like maybe 8 or 9 chapters. I think it's chapter 1, which is the diseases, chapter 2, neoplasm, chapter 4, diabetes, chapter 9, cardiac, chapter 10, respiratory, which is also part of chapter 1 when you talk about sepsis, because they go into acute respiratory failure. Then cardiac and also has some of chapter 13, which is CKD, and then knowing the chapter 19 and chapter 20 and chapter 16, pregnancy, because chapter 19 is your adverse effects, your poisonings, your underdosings, and then chapter 20 is your external causes.
So what exam are you sitting for?
CPC.
CPC.
Okay. I don't know if because the CPC exam is an exam of CPT and not necessarily ICD-10, you would need to focus, in my experience, you would need to focus some of your diagnosis efforts to common diagnoses that would relate to that particular section of CPT. For example, if you're coding in the musculoskeletal system, then you
Yes.
would need to, fractures may be something that you would run into. And so they would kind of test you on fractures. Possibly burns, maybe something that you need to brush up on and make sure you understand the ICD-10 guidance related to that.
Okay.
So you would need to kind of go CPT chapter by chapter and marry it with the ICD-10 sections that fit into that.
Thank you.
And burns are in chapter 19.
Okay.
And
you may have some adverse effects. I can see some adverse effects happening in that as well. So, yeah.
And when it comes to fractures, pathological fractures are in chapter 2, which is the neoplasms. And when you learn about the pathological fractures, then you'll learn the difference between a pathological fracture and a traumatic fracture and how they get coded.
Thank you for the clarification.
Mm-hmm.
And the other good thing that I always refer my students to, particularly if you have a good ICD-10 book, most of them are decent, but the ones that have like the examples, so you have ICD-10 books, and I'll speak to fractures. I know there was ICD-10 book that actually lists the various types of fractures, which is helpful in I'm reading a comment. I'm sorry. That was helpful. And, I get easily distracted, which is helpful in understanding kind of the process. And then oftentimes those will be the differences between your code selection and what the guidance tells you that you need to code. So again, taking into consideration, that's why it's important with your CPC exam that you also have an understanding of anatomy. You also have an understanding of pathology, that you understand, how our body works, and not, to the level that you're now feeling like you're in medical school or something, but and this, you nurse people probably already have this a little more down than a non-nurse coder, but the non-nurse coder would need to make sure that they're putting in that same effort to understand those things. And so where you may not specifically have a pathophysiology question, understanding the processes about the body or understanding the anatomy about the body will help you easily discern what the appropriate and the correct answer is for a particular question. So Terry asked, what did they do and why did they do it? Are you asking what did AAPC do and why did they do it? Well, AAPC is changing their exam formats. They are now making their tests 4 hours and reducing the number, specifically with the CPC exam, to 100 questions. Why did they do it? There's a whole white paper that suggests this was necessary and needed. They did some benchmarking studies. They looked at other. Oh, no, not that is a tip for the tester. I don't know what you mean. Please clarify. Tell me more. We can answer more. Yeah, so it's going to be.
While you're waiting for clarification, I have a question, Clarice, and I want your compliance spin on this. This is a work-related scenario, by the way. So, I started my job 2 weeks ago, right?
Yes.
And
are you still there?
You realize once you start lifting up and looking under the hood, you see all kinds of things. So when I met with my manager this week, one of my concerns was, because when we were talking about the CDI flow and how we're going to track, it didn't occur to me that their EMR system, what happens is when they send a query to the provider goes back into the medical record. And mind you, this is like 2 days after the date of service. The provider goes into the medical record and changes or corrects whatever information they're asking. And I'm like, wait a minute. How can they go into a medical record that's already been signed? I said they should only be able to do a late entry or an addendum.
They're not closed out. They're not closing them out automatically.
They have it. They have at the bottom. They have a signature, and it's been because these are nurse practitioners. So it's a nurse practitioner signature. Then there's a provider signature. But then when they go back in, the only then the signature line at the bottom is updated. Then you have to go in and you have to deselect some button to see what was the original content versus what was changed. And I'm like, I've never heard of that. Like that doesn't even sound compliant to me, because how do you know, like, if this record is subpoenaed, how do you know what was the original content versus not? Because these are not going to, it's going to need to be printed out. You're not going to be able to have a laptop and click on these buttons and do all that.
So if you're reviewing their EMR, there's always an audit trail. And so from a front end user perspective, of course, you're going to take, whatever is front facing. And so where they've made those corrections, I agree with you. The correction shouldn't, if you know how to document properly and you have a proper documentation manual, it will clearly tell you that you need to add addendums and or late entries into that. That's medical records 101. But from a perspective using the EMR and auditing, so if they're requesting information they want to see, then they can go in and request that. Even if they print it out, you can print out the whole audit trail. And usually that's part of one of the requests. So if they're asking for a particular patient and all of the records, they're not just necessarily asking you for the encounters. They want to see the behind the scenes, because they know those types of things occur. And so you would go in and you would see, oh, okay, this user came, because that's how you can determine oftentimes who did what in the note. So while it may not necessarily be a copy, cut, and paste situation, you can go in and see where another nurse went in and completed all this stuff, and then the billing nurse or billing provider completed just this stuff. Well, you don't have enough information here to even bill this service because you didn't provide and document those services. So you can go in and get that audit trail that clearly defines who did what and when they did it.
But their audit trail doesn't do that. When you click on the audit tracker, it just says who was in there and at what time. To find out specifically, you have to go up and you have to go back into the medical record and deselect. You have to toggle between these two check marks to actually see the original content versus the updated content.
So does their medical record release of information people know? There may be a different module. I don't know what EMR you have. There may be a different module that they use that can get that background information, preparing it for audit requests or record requests. So I don't know.
They don't, because their medical record request person is my supervisor, who's like the jack of all trades.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir. So there appears to be some training that needs to happen across the board in your new role.
Absolutely. And the thing is, and as every time I say we should do this, oh, they're not going to do that. To provide they're going to push back. So I told her, I said, wait a minute, because she doesn't have a clinical background. And I told her, I said, listen, I understand that we want to get as much compliance as we can, and we want to make it as easy as possible for these providers. I said, but there's not a provider in this world who does not know about documentation. This is not these people's first jobs. They have gone to school. They have worked other places. And I told her, I said, because she was talking about, well, you don't want, well, I don't want to send them too many queries. I said, can you imagine? I said, just imagine a large hospital. Let's just say like any large hospital in your area, they have hundreds, if not thousands of queries a day, and they manage them because there's an expectation. There are rules around when you have to respond and who's going to track it and what happens when you don't respond.
Yep.
It's all about setting expectation and holding people accountable. Now, if you're going to just let them do whatever, then why even bother?
Exactly.
Just let them do whatever, and you just keep on. Because what you're doing now is right now you're running around trying to get in front of a moving train when you can't do that.
And some of those queries can oftentimes be reduced if someone is trending those queries to see, do we have some commonalities? Is there something that we're seeing over and over again? That would indicate an educational opportunity. And so you pull the people together that you're seeing that works in that particular area, because you may not even seen notes from some folks outside of that. But then you pull those same people together who seem to have or could potentially have that issue, and you provide the education so that those queries prayerfully go away. And then you can focus on the next. And so that's one of the way of managing a large system and that query process. But yeah, to your point, so do you all have the manpower for that, or is it just you two?
It's just us two.
Oh.
And it's just us two. And next month they're bringing on 50 more providers.
Bless your whole entire. Are they bringing on another CDI person?
Not yet. But they have 20 more that do their own thing.
That is amazing to me that, you don't that's like building your house. You don't set the foundation for the growth. I don't understand that.
I told her the same thing. I said, you should not be bringing on any more providers until these 20 are in line and you have a measurable result. You can see, okay, well, this is we can track now. We know what the trends are. You're just gonna bring more people into chaos, and then expect it to work out, and that's not how it ever works out.
No. So when they bring these providers on, or is there an orientation process that is directed to them, and what your querying process is, or even your compliance process? Is there?
Yesterday, I spent most of the afternoon working on the query policy. Their current query policy is 2 bullet points.
Sir, I'm about to shut all of this down right now.
I'm not lying to you.
I'm about to hit this end button right now, sir.
I'm being 100%. I'm telling you, it was 2 bullet points. Like they had no process. And then she gave me a draft where she wanted to put in their verbal queries. I said, no.
Oh no, you don't. No.
No, I said, first of all, you have no control over we have no written query policy. Verbal query policy, and you have to have a whole separate verbal query policy, and it becomes way too detailed, and it's not worth it.
And that's a managing nightmare.
Exactly. I said, don't take verbal out. No, it needs to be in writing. Period. And then no. So I took that out when I was doing my revisions, and I had my query policy now has, I think, 14 bullet points.
Okay.
So, I mean, it goes into what what is considered complete, what's considered answered, and then there's the mention that if they don't respond within 40 hours, then you institute the escalation policy, which I have to work on this weekend. But when I tell you they have nothing, they have nothing.
So does your policy have to be vetted by the higher ups?
Oh, I'm sure. This is just like rough draft number 1 that I just did yesterday. So I sent it to her for just to see how she feels about where I am thus far. And then on Monday, I'll, give her the escalation policy, and then just wait. Because I asked her on yesterday, I said, well, who is in charge? I said, are these nurse practitioners grouped Like, or are they all under the same supervision? Because we need to know who their supervisor is. So when they don't respond to the queries, we need to know who that person is, what the title is, and what they're and they have to be involved in this query escalation process.
Mm-hmm.
So she said she didn't know who that person was. So
how long they been? They're new, right? I'm trying.
She's been there a year. They've been like fully operational a year.
The company, the organization. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But okay. Woo. You got your hands full.
I do.
I would make a suggestion is, how I am. Who is there a compliance department? Is there a compliance officer? Is there?
Not that I know of.
Jesus.
It should be, but because first of all, like this you can't have a compliance department when you have a query policy with only 2 bullet points.
Well, unless they circumvent them, that's a whole other conversation. How folks like to circumvent compliance because they want to do what they want to do and they don't want to hear the no or the let's try it this way, or let's put a different spin on it, or let's maybe we can do it, but let's do it this way. They don't want to do that. So oftentimes certain departments, certain folks like to circumvent the whole compliance process. And then when they're tapped on the shoulder and audited, oh Lord, compliance is where's our compliance person? Please help us. We need help. When most of the things could have been avoided on the front end. It's that whole being reactive instead of proactive.
Because like I told her, like throughout the week, I said, it's just you have to have some accountability. You have to have some rules and regulations. Mm-hmm. And I told her, I said, providers will complain about anything because they don't want to do. They just want to do what they want to do. Period. I said, but the thing that what I found hard to believe is how they don't have a process, because here's what it is. They are doing telehealth visits they have been subcontracted by a larger health plan to do telehealth renal visits. Okay. So there's not a lot of information that these people have, that the providers have in terms of medical records. Okay. That was a whole separate conversation that me and my supervisor had, because because of that, the providers are cautious to make certain diagnoses. So they're very general. Okay. Like, for instance, like I know, I've just been trained, like when you see congestive heart failure, you want to look to see if you want more specificity. Like, right. Is there an echo? Is there a cardiology visit so you can figure out exactly what type of heart failure? So I had come up with earlier in the week, I had come up with some sample queries. And as I was telling my supervisor, I said, the bottom line is querying is not hard. It's all about language and making sure that you don't lead the provider to a certain diagnosis. Right. It's just, you want to put in just the facts and leave it alone. And put it and ask them in their professional judgment. Can they, clarify?
Because ultimately it's up to them to determine.
Right. Yep. So I was telling her, I said, since we don't have access, or since the providers don't have access to their medical records and they're just talking to these people blindly, what we have to decide to do is we have to pick and choose what types of queries we're going to make of these people, because what is the expectation? If they don't have access to certain medical records, certain queries shouldn't even be sent. And I said, for example, I did this whole sample query for specificity for congestive heart failure, but if they don't have access to their medical records, that's a waste of time. And I did one for CKD staging. I said, if they can't order this person to go have labs and have a GFR done, then why? Just, if the person has an AV shunt and they go to dialysis 3 days a week, okay, well, that's end stage. If that's what the provider says, then that's what they say. It is the movement. Because if you don't have access to the medical records and they don't seem to have a policy in place to get medical records, because I said there, I don't understand how you can have an insurance company that you have a contract with, and this insurance company can't give you or send you these people's medical records. I don't understand that. Because so she was like, well, I worked at an insurance company. We don't have the records because they have a PCP. I said, okay, but they have a contract with the PCP. And I told her, I worked for insurance companies too. And I had no problem going into somebody's medical record. They could have been across the country, going into their medical record and going into the consults and saw that they had a consult with an oncologist 2 months ago. Like, I can't believe it's that hard to get medical records. But if it is, then we have to scale our expectations accordingly.
So are they involved in the health information exchange? Do they have the capability to and the interoperability to do those?
Here's what it is. When it comes to the health, they are squirrels chasing nuts. So they are all over the place. And some states they have access to an exchange and some states they don't. I don't even know which states they have access to the exchange to and what states they don't. Those are the kind of things you need to know.
Right, because then that addresses that whole conversation and getting the information that you need. You're a provider of that patient now, so you shouldn't even have to go through all of that. You are a direct provider to that patient. You've provided services, so you should be able to have access. So yeah, do they have IT people?
I'm assuming, but I don't know what they do. Because let me tell you, so I would. So is
it just 2 people y'all do? And some providers? I don't know.
And they have 2 other coders.
Oh goodness.
Oh, which by the way, if you know anybody who is certified, like even a CPCA, or if you know someone in risk adjustment, they're looking for people.
Okay. So
let me know. Pass them along.
Definitely.
I think you got a Rolodex. But I have another I have another coding question, which might be good for everybody. I was reviewing this medical record, and I sent a query to this provider. I was reviewing a medical record, and in 2017, the person was inpatient, and they had an incidental finding of a vertebral lumbar fracture, and the person had osteoporosis. So they they weren't treated, and they didn't have any surgery, and they wore a back brace. So in the review of systems for that particular encounter, it says the provider said that the back pain was related to arthropathic psoriasis. So she diagnosed arthropathic psoriasis. So I was talking to my supervisor. I said, well, she needs to be sent a query. I said, because is it arthropathic psoriasis, or it's right here documented that this woman has an untreated lumbar vertebral fracture. So she was like, well, do you think that she would still have she would still be affected by it? Because it was 2017. You think she would still be affected by it now? I said, it says it was untreated. And it says she wore a back brace. So we don't know, does she still wear a back brace? She still has back pain. So is the back pain from this untreated lumbar vertebral fracture, or is it from arthropathic psoriasis? So I said, so we have to send her a query, because if it's related to this, if the provider says that it's related to the lumbar vertebral fracture, then it's a sequela of a pathological fracture.
Right, you're going a whole different route. Yep.
Right, because she has osteoporosis.
Yep.
So she was having a hard time following me. But
so she didn't think a query was warranted?
She didn't think that, no, because she didn't think that the lumbar vertebral fracture would still be bothering her, because the provider said that the person had pain they connected the back pain to the psoriatic, to the arthropathic psoriasis. But okay, but right here it clearly says on an incidental finding, the person had an untreated lumbar vertebral fracture.
So let me ask you this question.
Mhm.
So in your role, were you hired to help them establish their query process? Were you hired to help them, or were you hired to do what they already have?
I was hired to create and develop a CDI program.
Okay. And she understands that?
Yeah, and she herself is a CDEO.
Really?
She had, yeah.
Okay. So that's interesting because of the pushback that you're receiving from her. That's interesting. Because how can you effectively provide the job that you were hired to do with the pushback that you're getting, that ultimately at the end of the day makes the entire organization better?
Right. And the thing is, it's pushback from her, not even the provider.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So she's the block, the barrier.
Right. And I told her, I was like, well, there are thousands of people who have back pain, who have knee pain, who have leg pain for years, and they go for a random test or they go for an MRI, and then bam, they have an undiagnosed fracture.
Hi, Ken. Welcome to the room. Feel free to come up to the stage and enjoy the conversation. Hi, Terry. Welcome. Feel free to come up to the stage and join the conversation. Okay. I don't know what. I feel like just in the brief time that I've known you, I think it's been, even though it's been brief, it's been quality. So quality over quantity. I feel frustration coming out. I feel that a conversation with her. So who does she report to?
She reports to. He's funny. The person she reports to will go, and he believes in these. He believes in suspects because that's what Humana does. Like, and all of them have some kind of affiliation at some point in time with Humana. Okay. And I told her from the beginning, and I told him during my interview, in CDI, there's no such word as suspect. Mm-hmm. Period. Suspect, you are not in coding. There's no such word as suspect. Mm-hmm. That is something that they made up, and it needs to stop. I said, because it's not compliant. You will not find anything. You will not find any documentation anywhere where any coder can suspect a diagnosis to a provider. You cannot. So that's what they. So he, in his zeal, because it's all about HCC. So in his zeal, he goes through these charts, and he'll go through labs and suspect through labs, which as a coder you cannot do. You cannot code from radiology lab, none of that kind of stuff. All you can do is point out. I said these are clinical indicators. They're not suspects. That's what they are. So if there's a discrepancy, if the provider says this person has stage 2 CKD and they have a GFR of 16. You can't say suspect in stage CKD. No, you have to ask the provider based on the documentation you diagnosed this person with CKD stage 2, that the GFR lab report on such and such a date states that their GFR level is blah. Can you clarify the stage of CKD? That's it. You cannot do any more than that.
Wow. Yeah, you got your hands full.
I think you've known me well enough.
I know.
I had an interview yesterday.
That's why I asked you, and you still there? Okay. I was asking. I know. Hey, come on, Ken. Feel free to come up to the stage. Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. That's sad because the opportunity exists. I feel like just even in the conversation and what you've gleaned in the short time you have been there, you've identified the gaps. And plugging in some of those gaps will again make the organization better. I don't understand why. I don't know. Folks are funny. Folks are funny. It's like we're a team. Yeah, folks are funny. We can all make this, happen. Shine the team overall, and still get to the desired end result, but not with the barriers. Like you said, not with not having any accountability, not with, saying, oh, they won't do that. No, that's part of the whole challenge. And so you're going to constantly be butting your head up against the wall every time.
And when you're going to bring on 50 additional providers, like you have to, like the medical record has to be locked after they sign it, and they need to create addendums. They need to create late entries.
Mm-hmm.
They have to, like, just that toggling back and forth is just no. It's just no. And I have audited plenty of records where you'll see a particular data service and you'll see a late entry or an addendum for that same data service days later. That's what it's supposed to be, so you can look and see exactly what was done.
What was changed, exactly. That's how you do that. So I'm and that whole thing is curious to me. And please don't tell me what their EMR. We have to talk offline. I'm curious to see how they even getting that off. Because if that encounter is closed, how are they getting that off? I don't understand.
Exactly.
Interesting. Well.
Hello.
Hi, Kim. Welcome.
Hi, Clarice and Jesse.
How are you, Ken? And welcome to Clubhouse.
Hi. I just wanted to say this is like the coolest podcast. This is the coolest guest room. Clubhouse. I'm new to Clubhouse. But I was the one that Clarice mentioned a couple episodes that was like, no one's talking about this kind of stuff. It's always like the YouTube coding space is kind of like review your guidelines, this and that. But I really enjoy hearing this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like the ins and outs.
Well, I'm glad we can provide that information.
Real life.
Yes, because it is.
Yeah.
There's and we kind of talked a little bit about that earlier. There's the whole classroom academic experience, and then there's the real world experience. And while sometimes they butt up against each other and they can walk the same line, there are variances, and you just have to know what you're walking into. And then you even have variances in the different employment experiences. So we like to talk about it.
Right. Yeah, like Jesse, you had that story a couple episodes ago where your supervisor at, I think, a previous place was not even a coder, like something completely unrelated.
Right.
And I don't know. That's so strange to me. Because it's funny because I have my RHIT and CCS.
Okay.
And I'm thinking about getting the CPC. Especially because of the news, right? It's only 4 hours now. I just got into the right time. But I'm also a new coder. I just started coding for risk adjustment.
Okay.
And I code like primary care and SNP and that kind of stuff. And I gotta say, this stuff is hard. Even just diagnosis coding is hard. You get dinged on like things that you didn't notice or something, or you just find out, but yeah, I have to say, even risk adjustment coding, school teaches you to be like a facility coder, but especially my program, it was an RHIT and CCS eligible program.
Okay.
But I wanted to ask a question about like furthering my education as far as like a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
I think for us, right, like if I have the RHIT, I think the logical way to go is the RHIA.
Mhm.
But like my goals as for my career, I want to compound on my coding experience. And I had a professor tell me maybe I should get a degree in business. I haven't really investigated too far, but it kind of makes sense, right? Because like they report to the CFO and like finance and revenue cycle and all that. Well, revenue cycle, I guess reports to finance. So also there's the healthcare administration degree, and so there's like three. I'm not really sure where to go, and I wanted to know maybe your insight, like what you've seen. From what I've seen, like on LinkedIn, is like all over the place. Health administration, no degree, but very few RHIA. And I kind of just want to know your advice on that.
So I think because of the technical components and aspects, particularly related with coding, the higher education is more broad. And so we even talked a little bit about this before. When you look at your RHIT program, like they mention coding per se, or give you just a high level introduction to coding and what it is, but you don't get the specifics unless you are going for maybe like a certification, or if they have built into their program where they are grooming you for coding certification, then you'll get more down into the weeds. So from a broader perspective, depending on where you want to go with your career, like I have my RHIA and I went to school for a health information management program with my alma mater, the University of Cincinnati. I just have to shout them out as we plug it along. Okay. But and so for me, it wasn't necessarily the primary reason why I went and got my degree was not necessarily to advance my coding skill per se, but it was to assist me in moving through the organization. If you are looking for, usually in larger organizations, if you're looking for management, if you're looking to excel in those areas, you have to have that degree. And then if you're planning to get even higher, then of course the stakes are higher. And so then they're looking at a master's degree. You're right. They're all over the place as it relates to the degrees. You will find folks who have business degrees if you're looking at revenue cycle as a whole, because there are different components of revenue cycle and where folks fit. So you'll find folks with finance degrees, you'll find folks with business degrees, you'll find folks with health information degrees, you'll find folks that are that have IT related degrees and certifications. So it's which is the beauty of it. You'll find legal law degrees, you'll find it all. You'll even find the clinical side. So you'll find your nursing degrees, and other clinical practitioners as well. So it really depends on what your end game looks like and where you want to land and what you ultimately want to do. What's your ultimate goal? Because you wouldn't want to invest in a degree that you won't use. That would be foolish, I think.
Yeah. I guess, I would see myself, kind of like moving up the ladder, I guess, in a sense, like maybe being a manager and then being a director or something like that. But a lot of times those director and manager positions, maybe not manager, but the director roles are usually taken by like physicians. So that's another conversation. As Jesse had a good nugget of information on a couple episodes ago. about nurses being only CDI. And I remember reading a long time ago about an article from HEMA about coders versus like clinician CDI.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe Jesse said that, you know, it's not super duper necessary to be RN, MD, RT to be a CDI. And I thought that was really interesting and cool because straight up on the application, they won't even consider you. Also, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Medical Coding Geek on YouTube. He has a same situation where he started out as an RHIA and then got into CDI when CDI got started in like 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's not really eligible anywhere else. So I thought that was an interesting story he had. Like, wow.
And he was even talking about going to school to get his RN at one point.
Yes, and I wanted to ask you about that. I know there's like, do you think it's worth it if I were to do that as a coder? Because
what you have to do, Ken, like you seem to have a lot of energy and enthusiasm, which is great. But what you really have to decide is what it is you want to do. And I know that you want to maximize, you want to be as prepared as possible, but you are really going to have to decide what it is you want to do, because the thing is, you don't want to go to nursing school just to get a nursing license and then do nothing with it.
Exactly. Because then you have to maintain that. You have to continue
Right.
your continuing education and all of that. You take your, like now you have CEUs that you have to have on the coding side. You'll have to have other things that you would need for
Right.
continuing education on the nursing side, and that's a lot. That could be a lot.
The only difference, and I can see, because matter of fact, I spoke to my supervisor, because that's what she told me, that they are looking to bring on some CDI people, but not anytime, not first or second quarter of next year. But anyway, so they were talking about hiring, and they were talking about who they wanted. So I told them, I said, listen, my only request is that anybody who is CDI, make sure they're a coder. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to be a nurse. They don't have to be anything clinical. And I told us, because the only benefit, and it's my experience, the only benefit to having a clinical background in CDI is that most people who are not clinical, if you're not a nurse, you don't know what it's like to go toe-to-toe with a doctor. But when I tell you, and I said it on this show before, in those nurse stations and on those phones, it goes down.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And you have people who go toe-to-toe, because some doctors are full of it, and they need to have their coattail pulled, like, look, bruh, you're getting ready to get me and everybody else hung up in some bull crap. No, fix this notation you have right here.
Exactly.
So you need people who aren't afraid to speak truth to power. And your MD means nothing, because I'm not going to jail for you, and I'm not going to sit up in no deposition for you. It's not going to happen. So that's the only benefit of having a clinical background, period, is you're just used to sparring with providers. That's it.
And once upon a time, health information management had that same tenacity, and they had that. Now they weren't doing it on a daily basis, but there were like you had to have, well, I'm talking way before EMR. So if your charts weren't signed or your documentation wasn't completed, then they would have to have these crucial conversations with these providers, which ultimately led to possible suspension or, getting rid of them in that particular hospital, losing their credentialing, their privileges. That's the word I was looking for. Losing their privileges, etc. So once upon a time, we had that. For some reason, a lot of that has rolled back. And it's like, oh, well, maybe they got a lot going on. It's a lot for them. EMRs, they got to type, they got to this, they got to that. We all do. We all do.
Right.
And ultimately, our patient, that's our client, that's our customer. It's our job to make sure that we're doing everything that we can, clinically and otherwise, to advance the health of our patients. And it's like, we're all in this together. we all have different arms in it, but we're all in this together. So it's amazing to me how, you know, some of those conversations, oh, well, maybe, well, if you could just do this and if you could just do that. No, do your job, ma'am and sir.
Right.
Do your job. It's
Yeah,
okay.
like I understand like their feelings, because like we're like you know they just want to care for the patient, like the doctors. When you, like, for example, when you query, it's funny because when I started already, I queried a provider, and they were like, he's trying to link like one of those diagnoses that's like diseases and classified elsewhere. And you know, you need an accompanying diagnosis to, like, you know, link it, right? Or yeah. And he just said lipids, and I'm like, can you clarify that? That's not like a diagnosis. And then I screenshot like my book, like there's no lipid, like there's lipidosis, but he didn't say that. He said lipid. And then he replied, "You guys are so micromanaging." I'm like, "Oh my god, I just felt weird." Like, that's not. First of all, it's not a thing, and number two, like, it was like polyneuropathy or something like that in diseases classified elsewhere. So that's an HCC. So I need to clarify that so we can capture it or not, or, you know, yeah. So yeah, it's crazy. Also, I told them to amend the note sometimes, and then they amend their billing. I'm like, no, that's not. I'm a health information management professional. Health information. You got to edit the health information.
Right, right.
But all that, everything you described, Ken, is lack of provider education.
Yep.
Because
yeah,
because my supervisors share with me some emails because how they query now. Let me see how they do it currently. I'm gonna make it fast. They screenshot parts of the chart that they want to question, and they highlight things, and then they email it to the provider, and they have this. It's not compliant language. But I told them, I said, first of all, I said there are no screenshots in query.
oh.
I said, we need to stop that. I said, they're supposed to go to the medical record. That's why you include the patient ID number. They're supposed to go look at the chart.
Right.
And not look at your screenshot and assume anything. They're supposed to go to the chart and review that encounter. That's number one. And also, but I want to say, Ken, when you were talking about getting dinged, let me tell you, so part of my orientation is I'm also learning their EMR system, and I'm also doing doing coding as well. So I recently came from a home health coding background. So I have gotten dinged so many times because now I can find a Z code in the dark at 4 a.m. with one eye closed coming from home health. So I get hammered all the time. I'll always have to have my Z codes removed because, for instance, if somebody has a history of if the diagnosis is history of prostate cancer and they had a prostatectomy, I code absence of prostate. But in risk adjustment, it's not necessary. Right. So I have to kind of unlearn. And that's why as broad as coding is, you have to find your niche in there.
Yep.
So that's why I'm telling you, like, decide what it is you want to do. And if you want to go into the business aspect, because you're right, because it all comes down to money. Honestly, if you want to go into the business side, I wouldn't say necessarily business. I would say if you really want to get into the numbers, accounting. Because if you have like your coding background, and if you wanted to get into the money aspect, you could become a certified fraud examiner, and you could make buku money.
Is there remote opportunities for that?
I would assume so, but I don't know. But like who you could work, that you could work for, they're like law firms. Matter of fact, like one law firm reached out to me on LinkedIn. They were looking for nurses to do like investigative chart review. So they have law firms who will handle, who will hire, and somebody, because it would be like forensic accounting almost. And then with your knowledge of coding, in addition to your knowledge of accounting and how to trace money and how to calculate large sums of money, man, you'd be set. But that's if that's the direction you want to go in. If it's not, then you find the direction you do want to go in.
Yeah, that's going to be the key, is determining, ultimately where you want to land. Because the opportunities are endless. That's the one thing about our profession that I love. There's so many different ways and places that if it's piquing your curiosity and your interest, that you can get into.
Because you don't want to chase money, because there's always money out there to be made. Because at the end of the day, like even like writing policy, if I didn't like it, I would not have wanted to spend 3 hours yesterday researching. I wouldn't have. You have to do something that you like.
Yeah, I think for me right now, just getting into facility coding, because I'm doing like PCP and for risk adjustment. But yeah, do those CEOs and like, it'd be cool to be a CEO, but I don't know. Do they value like that coding experience and like director roles and stuff?
You can be a director especially if you. Well, I know directors who don't even have a degree.
Right.
But if you wanted to get one, you could certainly be a director. I mean, because it depends on what size company you're working at and what exactly you're doing and how you move up and what skill set you offer that organization.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's another. This will be my last question. For like moving up, or even out, or even around in this organization. At the moment, I'm working at like one of the top 3 insurances. But seeing as like I'm just a remote coder, I'm not talking to other departments. Versus, like, even if I was, I used to do release of information in the hospital, and we would be the ones giving out the records for risk adjustment, actually, which is like crazy. Like, small world, right? Yeah, like at least I would walk around the hospital and even talk to physicians, not about work, but like, well, okay, about work sometimes. But yeah, like at least I would be I would be there in person talking to people. But now that I'm a remote, for coding, right, you would just have to apply at places. And once you're a coder, you're in. But for administration,
here's how you move up, Ken. You move up by mastering your skill set. You become the best risk adjustment coder you can be, and an opportunity will present itself. If not there, somewhere else.
Because you will be the expert. You will be the subject matter expert. You will be the person that when they think of risk adjustment, oh, Ken is the person that we need to call. Let's get him in this conversation. Let's talk to them about so and so and so and so. So that's how you build those particular relationships that you're looking for, even in a remote setting, because they will still bring you in and have the conversations with you. And that's how you would ultimately become the person that they look to. You become the resource. I'm always about being a resource and bringing people together and information together.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks so much for the advice. One comment I want to say is that you guys are on the East Coast and there are no coding YouTubers on the West Coast. I'm here in LA.
Oh, bless your heart.
I actually woke up early to listen to you guys.
Oh,
yeah, and like no one's here on the West Coast. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I wish there was, and could talk about like the California market, because in LA it's kind of like it's kind of saturated over here.
That's interesting. Well, maybe I'll reach out some feelers and see who I can find out in that market. Maybe I'll do some intel like you and stay up late and see what's the what on that side of the world, and see if we can bring some people on that can provide some perspective on the West Coast. That's cool. Okay, so it's 10:45. Normally, we do it. I don't even know why I keep saying that, because we have clearly gone over an hour every single time. It never fails. It never fails. So I want to thank everybody for participating in our conversation today. It's been a great talk. Even as we morphed from the changes and the information related to the AAPC's exams that are coming in a couple of weeks, it still was good information. Hopefully you got some tea spilled, you got some gems that were dropped, and some things that that were helpful for you. And if this information was valuable for you, please help us share this message with others by liking this video, sharing the video, and subscribing to our channel as well. You can check out the Coding Nurse channel on YouTube. Last but certainly not least, for those of you or my friends and family over there in the Clubhouse world, make sure you click on the greenhouse to join in the fun in our club, and you will always be notified of when we go live, our live broadcasts where we're speaking. Sometimes folks will just ping us in just to ask us a couple questions, and we're like, oh, okay, sure. I'll give my insight. So again, that's how you become the subject matter expert. People want to hear what you got to say. So again, this has been great. I said this was probably our last one for the year, and look, we went out with a bang. If something new comes up, then we may sneak on. But we're here at the holiday. Next week is Christmas, so we definitely won't be doing anything next week. And then New Year's Eve. New Year's. So if we don't, welcome. Everybody, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Enjoy your holidays. Take some R&R. It's been a year. 2021 has definitely been a year. Some ups, some downs, and some things in between, but we're still here. Lord willing, we will still be here when we cross over into 2022. So thank you all. I've enjoyed my time with you all this year. It's been fun. I've learned some new things. I've gotten some new skills. I've met some wonderful people. I got a new family member in my friend Jessie, the coding nurse.
Yeah.
It's just been great. And getting to know you all, those of you that actually come into the Clubhouse and provide information, and we don't necessarily try to push folks out of their comfort zone, but sometimes that little push is all you need to propel. So, we provide this space in our Clubhouse as an opportunity for you to get to know other people, connect with other people, find resources and subject matter expertise for things that you may have questions on or questions about. So, connect with each other, follow each other as well. Thank you again for joining. And as I always say, Jessie, did you have anything that you wanted to take us out with? Or
I just wanted to just echo the same sentiment. It has been an amazing experience so far, and I've enjoyed learning from Clarice and from everyone who comes into the room. And as I say all the time, like, we really give you the real in here, and that's a lot of people really make it flowery, and they give you this highbrow, almost therapy suite kind of thing. But we give you the real, and we're honest, and we give you right. And that's what you need, to be prepared. Like, you need to know the truth. You need to know this is what you have to know. This is how you prepare. Right. This is what you can expect to see. And even in work, this is how you plan your next step or your next move. So I hope you all continue to come back and tell a friend, and we all need to follow each other. And Ken, you're on the West Coast, but if you have questions, I started following you. Send me a message, send Clarice a message, and we'll see how we can help you.
Definitely. Well, thank you all again. As I always sign out, you remember to be safe, be kind, and don't wish for it, work for it. And so until next time, take care of yourself and each other.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.